So today I'm gonna tell you how and why I stopped being introverted. If you probably know me, depending on which era you know me from, I was possibly a lot different than I am now. Um, I guess it only makes sense to start from the beginning. I started off in the music industry when I was 14 years old. Um, then I was quiet, I was humble. Nobody could really, anybody could talk over me, but I feel like in those moments of my life, I already knew nobody could out rap me. And I knew that I was meant to be in the situations and in the rooms that I was in. But I always had an imposter syndrome because for some reason, even though I worked super hard to get in a lot of the places that I got, it never felt like I deserved to be there. That was an internal battle that has actually little to do with this video in particular, but if you like this video, then I'll go back into that. So the story of this starts when I went to Georgia State back in 2013. I had already done a few shows around the city. I stay in Atlanta, by the way. Atlanta is it's a huge market, but the more that you work the city, the smaller it starts to feel. At that time, the city felt humongous. I felt like a little itty bitty, like tiny blip, regardless of who I worked with, regardless of who I had been in the studio with, regardless of all of the things that, would validate me being really a part of this industry. Um, and I feel like it was just because I allowed myself to be little. I allowed myself to be little, like not just belittle myself, but I allowed myself to see myself as not as important or not as worthy of being in these roles. So at Georgia State, what caused me to stop being introverted was I realized that I have the gift of gab. I probably always had the gift of gab, but I realized that having the gift of gab worked in my favor so often, just in regular life, that if I put myself in the rooms with the people who could make my regular life into what I envisioned it to be, then that gift of gab would always work in my favor. So at Georgia State, it started off, I was just going to parties, just, typical stuff that you do with your homies. Um, I had left the studio I was working at, and I had been working at that studio since I was 14. So this was my first time being a regular civilian. This is my first time getting a 9 to 5. This is my first time going to like clubs without like having like I'm not performing at these clubs. I'm just in the club. Um so from that, I started moving around. I was meeting a lot of people. I met a lot of people before they blew up. I don't really like the name drop, but I was there on the ground floor. You see the archives of photos and videos, or even just run into these people. A lot of these people recognize me from those moments, and this actually comes to transmute into a whole different thing when we get to today. And this is part of why I'm doing this video, because I think that it's important for me to talk about why being an introvert held me back. So at the Georgia State, while I'm at Georgia State, I'm doing all kinds of different things, making all kinds of different networking connections that benefited me. Not as much then, but have benefited me in the future. So when I make these connections, what made me decide after leaving Georgia State, being introverted and being to myself and like locking myself in a bubble as an artist is one of the worst things I could do, was I started doing digital marketing strategy at a place called A Famous Joint. I already had a lot of different motion, a lot of different things going on, but at this point, I started realizing my gift of gab is working for other people because I was marketing for their business, but I was speaking, I was the voice for their business. And I was doing brand strategy, content execution, different stuff like that. Even running people's social medias. Some of the stuff that I've been doing recently, but more so just what really like took me over the edge was I have an NDA on it. I don't know if the NDA is expired, but I took somebody basically to exactly where they wanted to go. And I took it just off of will. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any connections, which that having connections is not as important as you think because every day that you go out, you can make connections. You just have to be in the right places. You have to know what you want. And you have to know which conversations are worth having and how long to have these conversations. So, what took me from being this introverted, I was already confident in a lot of ways, but like almost overly confident. I stopped believing in humility. It was all about me being the person who I say I am. And I had always been a man of my word and always been somebody who does what he says he's gonna do. But this was something that really like it took it over the edge, was just working in marketing. And also just seeing myself compared alongside others in the music industry who, if I compared on my own, I wouldn't even fathom that I'd be side by side or in the same category as these people. And even if you look at my YouTube now, I'm a generally small YouTube channel for right now. But it's because I was really introverted and like it poured into my craft. I got to a point where being introverted actually started to damage what I could do work wise and what I was capable of doing in the music industry because I got to a point where I didn't even want to share my music. I felt like it was too personal. I felt like it was too personal for people who don't know me to be able to call me by my name. All of that. But let's fast forward to now. Now I'm doing shows 2 or 3 times a week. Now I'm going into situations and having that same gift of gab, but also the connections that I've been making over the years from doing things that aren't introverted, going completely against my comfort. These connections are literally building not only a world for me, but a world for the people around me. I was at somebody's show a couple days ago. I was able to link them up with somebody who's going to get them a show in LA. This person in LA I met in college just off of some random in the club. We went to the same school, but it was like people they wanted to pit us against each other so much because he was popular and I guess, I was popular, I guess. And they wanted us to be against each other so much, but I never let it happen. No matter what people told me, it was like, well, when I see him, I talk to him, he showed me love. So I'm not gonna do no hater shit. I've never been on no hater energy. I always want everybody to win. So I link him with them. I linked them to one of the venues that I have been performing at with the Moon Jam for a while. And that's gonna turn into a show because they got the opportunities through me. They got certain things through me. That's gonna turn into a show with a few very big people that I know along with them. And that's just one of the things that you get when you open your mouth. Closed mouths don't get fed. It's really, really important to believe in yourself. It's really, really important to believe in the person who you say you are. And this is just one of the first times I hate talking into a camera. I hate doing interviews, but this is just gonna be one of them first times that I open up to you. I'm just gonna turn my camera on and I'm gonna talk to y'all. Being introverted is a curse. Don't allow that to take you over. And also, all of the things that you say that you deserve, you deserve. All of those things that you want to do, that you think that you're capable of, you're capable of. There's literally nothing in the way ever except for you and the excuses that you make that keep you from being where you want to be. I realize that a million times over. I don't really know how many times I've been in situations where I think that this is it. But for me, I don't think that there will ever be a defining this is it moment just because of the high standards that I set for myself. But what will make that difference is knowing that even though I may not have that moment that like feels like my life is completely changed and this is what it's supposed to be, I'm gonna have that moment where um it all makes sense, everything that I've done.